going to read an informational text to learn about some of the people that take care of trees. We're going to read this book, Growing Trees, by Judith Bauer Stamper, to learn a little bit more about the people that help this tree grow. You might be thinking about one of the people that help this tree grow because you might be seeing someone here on the cover. We're going to talk a little bit more about how kids can be tree helpers at the end of our story, or informational text rather. Let's get started. This is Growing Trees. Growing Trees, written by Judith Bauer Stamper and illustrated by Wesley Lowe. This is a picture of my tree and me. So this is the little girl speaking to us. We've been growing up together for a whole year. It all began last summer. I went to visit a national forest with my mom and dad. A forest is a great place to learn about trees. There are trees as far as you can see. We took a hike with a forester. So here's the first person that we're going to meet in this book who works to take care of trees, a forester. A forester is an expert on taking care of trees in the wild. So this forester helps to care for trees in a big national forest. The forester showed us small young trees and big old trees. They were like towering giants. So these foresters check on the trees that are growing out in the forest on their own. They're not growing in people's yards. They're not growing in parks where they're taken care of by the city, although there are urban foresters who take care of trees in the city. This type of forester works out in the wild, somewhere where you might go camping or hiking, or sometimes there's no people at all in these places. Then he explained the life cycle of a tree. It starts out with a seed, and in the spring, the warm sun makes the seed germinate or begin to grow. The seed sprouts a small root that grows down into the ground. The root absorbs water and minerals from the soil. Next, a small stem pushes up out of the ground and grows 2 tiny seed leaves. The leaves use sunlight to give the tree energy to grow. It's amazing how trees can make their own food to get energy just from the sun. A new growth called a shoot appears at the tip of the stem, and larger leaves grow from the shoot. The seedling is on its way to becoming a tree. The young tree keeps growing if it gets enough water and sunlight to survive. And in its next year of life, the tree grows buds that may turn into leaves. And soon the tree has branches, a woody trunk, bark, and lots of leaves. Each year, the tree grows taller and the trunk gets wider. A forester can tell how old a tree is by counting its rings. A tree has 1 ring for each year it has been alive. This tree was more than 100 years old. So this tree lived for a long time, and trees can do that in the wild, out in a forest on their own. But it's good to have people like foresters checking on them to make sure the conditions are ideal for growing. Foresters might check on trees to see how old they are, if they're getting enough sunlight, if they've been damaged in a storm or a fire. They count the rings of the trees to determine the age, but if a tree hasn't fallen down or hasn't been cut down, there's another way they can find out how old a tree is. A forester can also find out how old a living tree is by using a tree borer, special tool. It's a special tool that takes out a small part of the tree without hurting it. So we would never want to cut down a living, healthy tree to find out how old it is. Instead, foresters have special tools that they use to figure out how old a tree is without hurting it. our trip to the forest, I wanted to grow a tree of my own. Dad took me to a nursery where you can buy flowers, shrubs, and trees. So this is a special store where you can buy plants. They also sometimes have a nursery section at hardware stores. So maybe you've been somewhere like Lowe's or Frager's or Jinx or Home Depot, and you've seen the section where you can buy plants and trees at those stores. A nursery has trees that have grown big enough to transplant or place into a new spot. So these trees were started from a seed by someone else, and once they grew a little bit bigger, then they were dug up out of the ground, put into a pot of some kind so that they could keep growing at the nursery, and they're just waiting for someone to buy them and take them home to put them back in the ground somewhere else. The nursery worker, so here's another person that works to take care of trees. This is the second person we've seen in this book. Showed me trees that have flowers in the spring and fruit in the summer. And we looked at trees with soft leaves and trees with pine needles. So a nursery worker can help you pick out a tree that you might want to buy. I chose a maple tree. My tree was already more than 4 feet high, just a little taller than me. The nursery worker helped us choose a shovel to plant the tree. So a lot of times these nurseries also have supplies to take care of plants. They might also be hardware stores that have lots of different kinds of tools and things like shovels to care for your yard. She recommended organic fertilizer to feed the tree as it grew. This is something a little extra besides what the tree can get from the soil. Then she went over the instructions on how to plant my tree. So nursery workers not only can help you pick out a tree that you want to buy, they take care of the tree until you buy it while it's still at the nursery. And then they can teach you how to take care of it too. They can give you instructions for how to care for the tree when you get it home. I picked out a place in our backyard where the tree would have lots of sunlight and lots of room to grow. Then Dad and I dug a hole with the shovel. The hole was as deep as the tree's root ball and about 3 times as wide. So here's the root ball, the soil at the bottom of the tree where all the roots are. We carefully lowered the tree into the hole. We loosened the burlap around the roots. So the roots are going to be able to grow into the dirt down here. Next, we filled in soil around the tree, and I added the organic fertilizer to the soil and sprinkled mulch on top. Then I gave my tree a nice drink of water. So remember, we're learning about people in this book who work to take care of trees. This is just a little girl. She's not working, it's not really her job, but she is taking care of trees. Stick that in your brain for later. Dad asked an arborist, okay, this is our third person who works to take care of trees. Dad asked an arborist to check the other trees in our yard. An arborist is like a doctor for trees, a tree doctor. She pruned the branches of our big tree with pruning shears. So she gave the tree a little trim. It's kind of like when you get a haircut. She's not damaging the tree. She's actually cutting it to help it stay healthy. Remember, she's a tree doctor, so she's an expert on what keeps trees healthy. She checked all the trees for signs of disease. So now she's checking to make sure the trees aren't sick. She also listened for bugs using a stethoscope. She looked like a doctor. Wow, I bet you've all had experience with stethoscopes at your doctor's appointments. Your doctor might use a stethoscope to listen to your heart or your lungs. This arborist is using a stethoscope to listen to the inside of the tree. Trees don't have hearts and lungs, but they might have bugs scratching around on the inside, eating parts of their trunk, and that could make the tree sick. One of our oldest trees had been damaged in a storm. That's another way a tree can get damaged. The arborist used a handsaw and a chainsaw to cut off 2 broken limbs. I asked the arborist to check my tree, and she said it was doing just fine. She added a stake to help it grow up straight. When the weather turned cold, my tree's green leaves turned bright red. Then they twirled down to the ground. The next spring, my tree grew buds that turned into leaves. Over the summer, it grew branches with more leaves, and its trunk grew thicker. This is a leaf from my red maple tree. It has 3 lobes that have saw-toothed edges. The bark is dark gray and rough with little ridges. So she's taking an up-close look at her leaves and the trunk of her healthy tree. All summer I watered my tree and checked it for insects. It just kept growing. The arborist said that my tree could grow to be 60 feet high. That's taller than my house. This little girl really listened to the arborist. She paid attention to how the arborist cared for her tree, and now she's caring for her tree. Checking on it, making sure there's no insects eating her tree. Look at my tree now. It's much taller than I am. If I take good care of it, it will be around for a long, long time. A tree is a great friend to grow up with. And that is the end of our book, Growing Trees. In this book, we met 3 workers who take care of trees. We met a forester who takes care of trees in the wild, checking on them, checking their age, measuring them. We met a nursery worker who takes care of trees at a place called a nursery where you might go to buy plants. And we also met an arborist, a tree doctor, who checks trees to make sure that they're healthy. I also noticed the little girl in this book playing an important role in taking care of her tree. She checked on her tree. She watered her tree. She provided a lot of care for her tree, so you don't have to be any type of special worker to take care of trees. Kids can do this. Teachers can do this. Every citizen in our community can work together to take care of our trees. Maybe you'll think of some ideas about how you can care for the trees in your neighborhood. If you think of any great ideas, feel free to send them to me. You can email me. You can post it on Seesaw. We'd love to learn from you. I'll see you for our next story. Bye, Rockets.